Arabic and Hebrew. City Circle was founded by Muslims and still make up the majority of the volunteers and the guests who come to our events. But when City Circle was established 16 years ago, one of the principal objectives was to bridge the gap that sometimes exists between Muslims and other faith groups. So tonight we're going back to our roots as we explore the topic, building trust between Muslim and Jewish communities. Due to ongoing events in the Middle East, the Charlie Hebdo attacks and the recent incidents in Copenhagen earlier this year, the media is flooded with headlines emphasising tensions between Muslim and Jewish communities. This impacts negatively both on cross-community relations and also perceptions among the wider British public. Organisations like Tal Lama and the Community Support Trust report increasing levels of anti-Semitism and Islamaphobic attacks and incidents. Amid all of this, MUJU's recent show Come In, Sit Down explored identity, faith, community and nationalism through the medium of theatre and comedy. City Circle supported and sponsored the show when it played last week at the Tricycle Theatre to much critical acclaim. Having seen it myself, I know that it was incredibly funny while also raising lots of taboos. So joining us to discuss these topics and the show itself, I'm pleased to welcome Salman Siddiqui and Andrea Tudent, both involved in the MUJU success. Salman is the co-director and founding member of MUJU, who joined the group in 2004. Over the last 10 years, Salman has co-written, performed, directed and produced a number of shows for MUJU, including Extreme Prevention in 2010, a show that explored themes around extremism that toured the UK. He's particularly interested in exploring interfaith relations through comedy and music, and most recently he co-directed Come In, Sit Down at the Tricycle Theatre. Andrea is a theatre producer who describes herself as having a passion for creative cross-cultural encounters. She works as a visiting tutor at Goldsmiths University and started working as an associate producer for the MUJU Crew in November 2013, having recently become a co-director. She's co-facilitated MUJU's Summer Peace Lab, a theatre project which brought Muslims and Jews together to question and explore the concept of peace. She's currently co-facilitating and producing Peace Lab Reloaded, a follow-up theatre project in which Muslim and Jewish Peace Lab performers further investigate around the concept of peace. Most recently, she's been the creative producer of MUJU's stage show Come In, Sit Down. We're delighted that both of them can join us here this evening. Please give them a very warm welcome. There's a couple of ways that you can participate with the talks this evening. Later on we'll be inviting questions from the floor, so as things come up and enter your mind during the course of the talks, please make a mental note of them and we'll open up the discussion later on. And if you're on Twitter, hopefully you're already following us at the City Circle, and you can join in the debate and discussion tonight on Twitter using the hashtag CCTalks. But right now I'm going to hand over to Salman to kick off tonight's topic, building trust between Muslim and Jewish communities.
Thank you. Great. Well, look, I think it'll be great just to keep tonight really informal because we're kind of quite a small group, and it'll be just kind of really great to hear what you guys think as well and try and keep this as really interactive as possible. I thought maybe it'd be useful just to start by telling you guys a little bit about MUJU and how it started, my own involvement, and then just to bring you up to date with what we've just done. So MUJU actually started about 10 years ago. It started off as a youth theatre project at the Tricycle Theatre. There was a call out for young Muslims and young Jews to come together for a collaborative arts theatre project. I saw the call out and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I've always been quite interested in writing, performing, and it occurred to me that here I am, Muslim guy in my early 20s living in London. I don't really have a Jewish friend, so I thought I'll give it a go. So I went along and it was really good fun. Somehow the group in the room, we just kind of clicked, and the project involved us. We all met every Wednesday night, and yeah, we kind of just told our friends about it, and we started to advertise the group through community networks. And somehow we just generated this real momentum. which resulted in our first show at the end of that first year in 2005 called Tunnel Vision, which was also a sketch show exploring a lot of issues around kind of Muslim cultural stuff, but also social issues around poverty, child abuse, and a lot of the issues that people in the group felt quite strongly on. And then actually when the youth project, theatre project, came to an end, and actually most of the participants slowly kind of grew out of the age limit, we decided that actually we didn't want the project to end, we wanted to keep it going. So myself and a few of the others, we decided to do lots of grown-up things like set up a bank account, and we registered MUJU as a charity, and that's when I guess MUJU in its current form really started. And then I guess over the last decade or so we've been doing a number of different shows, a number of different projects, both professional but also community work in schools, mosques, synagogues, and comedy has played a really big part in the work that we've done. I've often found that that method is a way of it's a way to explore really difficult issues. I think if you try and attack really difficult issues really seriously, it can be quite overwhelming. And I think actually using humour is a way in. And I think when people are laughing, they're more vulnerable and more likely to maybe accept a different point of view. And I think the thing about MUJU actually that is quite unique versus maybe other interfaith organisations or interfaith ethos is that we're not about trying to bring people together to kind of talk things over. It's not a traditional interfaith which is about kind of talking and discussing. It's very much about getting a group of people together to create something together. So it's always about, we've got this performance, we're going to work together, we're going to do it. And it's that process and that deadline that creates the energy, and it creates the context of trust and understanding that then allows some more open conversation to take place. Obviously we do talk as well, but that's not the focus. It's about doing something together, which then facilitates those conversations. I think over the years, one of the things that's really struck me is that there's something really unique about the Muslim-Jewish relationship that, particularly here in London where we live, we basically live side by side, but actually often very separate lives. And I think that separation can also lead to mistrust, and particularly when there's, heightened tensions in the Middle East, and obviously that mistrust can even become something worse. And so I think it's really important to have these safe spaces where Muslims and Jews can come together, and I guess that's something that MUJU really tries to provide. And also I guess something that's occurred to me over the years is that we can't allow the media to dictate how we interact with others and how others interact with us, because I think the perceptions generated through media can be very warped, and obviously the media is very one-dimensional, and obviously life is much more complex. And actually using theatre as a way to try and demonstrate the different narratives, I think that's something that's really important. So the last year has been a really big year for us. We got Arts Council, Andrea came on board sort of 18 months ago, and through a lot of her work and the energy that she brought to the group, we were awarded Arts Council funding for the first time, which has been just fantastic. And with that funding, we've been able to put on this very professional production, which ran at the Tricycle Theatre last week. We'll come and sit down, which hopefully some of you in the room may have come and seen. And I guess the idea of the show was very much to get people to come in, sit down, and explore some of these difficult issues around extremism or gender equality and racism and all these kinds of different things, but again through the prism of comedy and entertainment. We also had some brilliant songwriters working with us, so we were able to put together a real kind of musical, Muslim-Jewish musical. So I guess that's kind of a bit of an introduction.
I think you said everything.
And I don't know, Andrea, over to you. Do you want to say anything?
I guess it's always sort of interesting to hear personal journeys and why people are attracted to coming to certain organizations and joining certain organizations. How many of you have seen a MUJU show just in the past decade? Not necessarily Come and Sit Down, but another show. Okay, cool. There's a few fans. Yeah, I guess the reason I joined MUJU is I'm from the Netherlands, and coming to London, I was really kind of struck by the diversity and the vibrancy that London has, and I think it's a real source of wealth, which maybe as a Londoner, people don't realize how incredible it is compared to the rest of Europe. But I guess coming from a Jewish background via my mother, I think I was always quite disturbed by, I guess, a level of Islamophobia and racism which I kind of saw in the Netherlands, and the way that sort of really divided kind of general Dutch people from sort of Turkish, Moroccan, Dutch Muslim populations. And I think one of the first things that sort of happened was I was working in a weekend school with these young kids from kind of backgrounds of social poverty and deprivation. And we had this art workshop in which we were making collages, and then there was this young boy, 10 years old, you know, really kind of, lively, crazy 10-year-old, who opened this National Geographic magazine, and there was this kind of picture of Matsyahu. I don't know if anybody knows who he is, but he's like this Orthodox Jewish rapper. And the little boy was like, "Oh, I hate Jews," and then he started like ripping up that magazine with scissors or whatever. And I just thought, whoa, what has this kid, what sort of stories has this kid been told that I'm obviously missing? Because there's obviously some reason why a 10-year-old feels this strongly about something. And rather than thinking, oh my God, anti-Semitism, I think I need to find out why, you know, what's the backstory behind this. And I guess there's a few incidences in my personal life which have just made me aware of that divide, which I guess with heightened tensions in the world, the older you get, the more you realize about politics, the more I kind of saw the necessity of that. Yeah, it's interesting also just hearing my American family speak about Israel and Palestine and how they're very biased about it and how they really don't know the other side of the story. So I guess because our worldviews are so shaped by the stories we hear and the images we see, they just construct our social reality. And I think a reason for me to join MUJU is because I think there's no place in which your social reality can be challenged as strongly as in theatre, because you're being brought together with other people and you're sharing stories and you're creating new ones and you're challenging each other's stories, and the very creative process of that and the intensity of that kind of challenges worldviews, but in a very creative and fun and intense way. So I guess kind of the urgency of the situation politically and also personally sort of inspired me to join MUJU. And actually I just googled Interfaith Theatre Companies London when I just moved here, and then MUJU came up and I was like, oh wow, I can only think of London as a place where this could possibly exist. So yeah, so I joined MUJU, and yeah, I guess we sort of started developing, because MUJU has an excellent track record of really cool shows. So I guess we had some new forces, and we kind of recognized the importance to create more work in response to, of course, the changing world in politics, and that's what led us to kind of submit the Arts Council application and create Come and Sit Down. Who has seen Come and Sit Down? Oh, quite a few people. What were some of the things you thought? I'm just going to make it interactive here. Yusuf?
It was quite controversial, some parts of it.
Cool. Any other comments? Anything is welcome.
There are a few more hands up than there. Yeah.
It was very well done, very subtle and thought-provoking.
Cool. Thank you. Any other comments? Even if you think it's terrible, that's like absolutely fine. Just it's good to hear the feedback. Anyway, I guess yeah, the reason we created that is basically to bring people together in one theatre space, people that might never normally share the same space, and get people laughing at the same jokes, or maybe cringing at the same jokes, or maybe being shocked by similar sort of scenes. And it's, I mean, the idea of come in, sit down was basically a play on the hysteria that is perceived in the media, but is also kind of felt by us personally sometimes, when the pressure kind of mounts and you feel under pressure, you feel exposed, you feel under the spotlight of all kinds of stories which are being projected on you, and the effect that that has within communities. And I guess sort of it's something shared in both communities, whereas I think the Jewish community is not in the spotlight nearly as much as the Muslim community in Britain, so I think there's a different sense of pressure, but I guess in the whole kind of light of the Middle East conflicts and Israel, of course, whenever something kicks off there, people feel a sense of pressure, and I guess it's kind of I guess that's something people share, and sometimes situations of pressure also sometimes it's better just to laugh than to cry about it, and that process of making work together and laughing and pulling the elephants out of the closets and kind of exposing them in the room is quite liberating as well. And that was the whole idea behind Come In, Sit Down. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think that's it's really, really true, and I think that one of the things that we tried to do was be very bold and very self-critical, because I think that's obviously very important, but at the same time trying to find a balance between that and not then reinforcing stereotypes. So obviously we wanted to talk about around jihad, for instance, but then again we don't want to kind of reinforce all the stereotypes about Muslim jihadis. So again, it was really trying to find new ways in, or new angles that maybe aren't very prevalent and very kind of already out there. And then just also following on something that Andrea said in terms of, I guess, also trying to create a balance, but also acknowledging where there are imbalances as well. And I guess it's one of the things that you said in terms of, I guess right now there is a big pressure on Muslims in terms of kind of like where do we stand? Like David Cameron's talking about where do British Muslims stand, or should we be doing more about extremism? Should we be speaking out more, etc. And I'm not saying those questions should or should not be asked, but they are being asked, and I guess that is putting the pressure, which maybe isn't equal and opposite in the communities, and I guess the show does reflect that.
Yeah, and actually the rehearsal process reflected that, because I guess we're also inundated with what we see every day in the news, even though we may or may not agree with it. It's still something that kind of roots itself in your subconscious. So I guess when we just started creating work, all of the stereotypes came out first. It was jihadi fighters and ISIS and settlers and like all the kind of, it's almost like we needed to get it out of our system before we could kind of get to the more nuanced kind of underlying personal stories which also exist but go unnoticed.
And also, I guess ultimately we always try to bring it back to British Muslims and British Jews, our experience, and ultimately the reason why we're talking about all these things is because it impacts us here, it impacts our everyday lives, it impacts the way people look at us. So we always try to bring it back to kind of the British experience, because ultimately that's all we can really talk about.
Shall I show some photos?
Please.
Cool. So, I mean, these are just some photos that were taken during one of the shows, and I mean, I can kind of talk about the scenes. This was a Disney medley scene of a young British Muslim girl that was basically groomed by a sort of Aladdin-style jihadi fighter who performed it in a very funny way, and it was kind of about her journey of kind of experiencing, I guess, racism and oppression, and that kind of making her susceptible to kind of his seductive kind of come here and you'll be my wife techniques, and then eventually kind of turning her back on him as well. And I guess something strong about this scene was it's a very kind of critical and painful issue, especially for families involved. And it's, I guess, an important thing with MUJU is we never want to laugh at the victim. We want to expose the story behind it. So a Disney song is a very good vehicle of kind of getting people to laugh, but the reason they're laughing also makes them think, oh my god, this is actually really tragic. But somehow, because it's comical, it goes in easier than if something is very serious. So yeah, this was a checkpoint scene of a young British girl on a gap year, who basically was, working in Israel on a helicopter and at a checkpoint, and I guess the scene kind of played on her sort of obliviousness of what's going on. There's one scene in which you don't see the Palestinian actor who's queuing up right now, but he goes, why am I supposed to wait here for 3 hours? And she's waving her gun on her phone going, I don't know, it's official. And I guess it's kind of these kind of comic things in which you kind of poke at maybe mentalities of just not really knowing what's going on, but kind of going along with things, and it's kind of a critique of that. We had a hip-hop rabbi-imam duo which confessed their secret desires, in which they wish they could kind of convert to each other's faiths and all the benefits. So, the imam saying, he'd have fun when Purim comes into play, and he could forget about Ramadan and fast only for a day, and then the rabbi saying, he wished he could have 4 wives and watch TV on a Saturday, because of course with Shabbat you're not even allowed to turn on a light. So it was just kind of comically referring to each other's kind of faith traditions, but in a kind of comical and kind of warm way. This is just some behind the scenes music writing. Do you want to talk about this scene, Salman?
Right, that was just the opening scene.
Yeah, it's the opening. We had an excellent musician on board who wrote amazing music, and this was the MUJU anthem. So it was basically a we're all Muslims, we're all Jews song, and then I guess all the kind of things that both communities share. It's kind of hard to describe theatre from a photo, but I hope it gives a taste. Who's seen this scene? Do you want to talk about this scene?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I guess one of the things that came up a lot when we were devising the show was issues around gender equality, and I guess one of the questions that came up was, why are Muslim men allowed 4 wives, but a woman is not allowed 4 husbands? So again, with MUJU, it's not about necessarily providing the answers, but I thought, okay, that's an interesting question. Let's see what that world would look like. So we had this scene where we had this Muslim woman, who has 4 husbands, and I just thought, I guess it's just quite an interesting metaphor, because you actually see this guy on the floor, and she brings out the second husband and the third husband, and you see the impact it has on him, and he obviously gets very distressed, I guess take what you will from it, but I guess there is a metaphor there.
And I think what's really important to say is even though the show has a director and a producer and a writer and everything, most of the content came from the actors. So, for example, this character was completely created by Amina, who just had this as a really genuine question, and MUJU is also a space in which we can say, okay, well, what if the world is, what if this is our world for a minute, and we can shape it and flip it on its head and see what that looks like. And I think that's another thing that theatre allows you to do and experience. And I guess we've had interesting reactions to different scenes. Some people love them, others thought, others didn't. It's not for everyone, but I think the most important thing is for MUJU to provide a space where questions can be asked that come from actors and artists within the space themselves. This was her Jewish puppet husband, which somehow she came up with so she could get a visa in the UK, her character. This was a scene about a checkpoint which was established on Brent Cross, and certain Jews were allowed in and not others, especially not those that read The Guardian, because they might be a little bit too lefty in their politics. So again, this was a sketch developed by the Jewish members of the group. Do you want to talk about that one?
So this was a sketch about Ramadan, but kind of an idea how the kind of commercialisation of religion, how Christmas has become very commercialised, Easter's become very commercialised, so what would a world look like where Ramadan is just kind of like a fitness diet, and you had this kind of Mr. Motivator who was trying to motivate everyone to do Ramadan as though it was just a workout. I guess that was kind of the point. It kind of the American infomercial style that kind of let's commercialise everything we can and make as much money as we can.
Yeah. Of course, every show has a classic Jewish mum, if there's anything Jewish involved. So this is Lauren, and yeah, she wrote an amazing song about her daughter that she wanted to get married, who ended up falling in love with a Muslim, which wasn't easy for her, but because, you know, his family was big and they didn't eat pig, she found a loophole and she was happy. So it was about kind of the similarities, because of course, you know, Jews generally don't eat pig either. So, and they have big families. So it was all about these kind of comic kind of similarities which are brought out in songs as well. And these are just different sketches. This was a sketch about an audition. Let's see. A sketch about things that were offensive but kind of escalated. Fatima and one of her 4 husbands. Oh, this was, you know, we also kind of addressed historical themes like the US involvement in the 70s in Afghanistan, and this was Taliban Tony, who was an American who kind of exposed, I guess, the US agenda in a very funny way. He decided he wanted to stay there, and it was a sketch around kind of exposing the American involvement in the 70s. Again, Amina, amazing performer and writer, she wrote a rap about this girl living in Kilburn, which was very, yeah, funny. So, I mean, this was a sketch kind of highlighting, I guess, with MUJU, balance is really important. So Fatima is maybe then Fatima and her husbands was a sketch in which kind of feminism was addressed from a Muslim angle through a Muslim artist, and then this was feminism addressed from a Jewish angle through a Jewish artist, and it was basically about this misogynistic rabbi that had trouble letting a woman speak in the synagogue for the first time, and made her kind of make a beard and, you know, open the book with this tool and not touch it. And
it was quite interesting because I guess, you know, you probably could have put this scene in the mosque as well. And obviously, there's so much going on at the moment in terms of, you know, the whole kind of sisters entrance and like Muslim women's space in the mosque, even talk of like women-only mosque, etc. So, you know, it's a big discussion in the community around women's spaces in mosque, and I think there were so many of these scenes where you could have just split them, and there was a direct parallel. So I think a lot of Muslims that watched this scene, I think it really resonated with what's going on in our own community.
yeah. And the funny thing about this scene is she's got a very high voice, so it was a scene in which he tried to outsing her and kind of cover her voice, but because she had such a high voice, she outdid him because he just couldn't reach her pitch, so that was kind of the gag of the scene.
And also, I guess, you know, it's a common theme in both our religions around this whole idea that somehow a woman's voice is really seductive and she should be silent and covered, etc. And I guess it was a theme that we played on.
Yeah. Something that's mutually recognizable. Do you want to talk about this sketch? You made it.
It's very hard to describe. So it's basically a woman who was kind of possessed by a settler. So she had kind of like a blood transfusion, and the blood had been donated by like a settler. So she kind of every now and then she just started taking on the characteristics of a settler, including at that moment saying to me, "Get off our land, you bastard." Sorry. It was kind of like, again, it was trying to find a way of exploring some of the Middle Eastern issues, but in a slightly indirect way.
And the physicality of the sketch made it very funny.
Yeah.
So it's you know, again, even if you don't agree with what's being said, you just can't help but laugh because her performance is so brilliant. So then I guess the whole kind of idea of laughing kind of lets down a barrier as well. So Femin, I'm sure Femin, people are familiar with Femin, right? Are you, Asma?
Yes.
Yeah. It's basically, who isn't familiar with Femin? It's basically this organization, I don't know if it started in the Ukraine or Russia, but it's this organization of feminists that kind of have an agenda to free Muslim women, but none of them are Muslim. And their way of doing it is to get naked in the street and write like, "No Sharia" on their breasts and stuff. And obviously, it's interesting because there's a big online campaign by Muslim women saying, "Listen, we can speak for ourselves, leave us alone, you have no clue what you're talking about." And it was kind of that feminist group that we kind of I guess, set up in this sketch, and they're kind of recognizable by the flowers they wear around their heads and stuff. And I guess it's also kind of a critique on kind of the idea that there's one kind of feminism, or that there's one kind of form of freedom, or that there's one sort of way of being a woman and being free and having your own choice. And I guess that's something many people aren't aware of if they're not actually involved in that debate, and they don't know that there's different experiences of freedom and liberation. So I guess that sketch was a critique on it. So I guess we explored feminism from quite a few different angles in the show. What was it? Oh, this was the anti-Semitic fairy. Yeah, so it was just something, there was quite a controversial sketch in the show as well, and I guess the way we kind of wanted to soften that was to put in an anti-Semitic fairy who got taken out, but she's still in the photo. Oh, this was the ISIS Disney grooming sketch. Oh, here's our Aladdin-style ISIS fighter singing down from a cupboard. And these are all his wives in the closet. he has a point where he sings, "Meet my wives," and then he opens up the doors. But I guess everything was to kind of set up his misogyny in a really kind of funny way. Oh yeah, and the bowing at the end. So it's just to give it a bit of an impression. It's hard to describe theatre from photos, but I hope this gave a bit of a snapshot. Anything you want to add?
Should we
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Simon and Andrea, for sort of both talking us through the show, and also giving a sort of background to MUJU as a project, and to sort of your own backgrounds and sort of how you sort of got involved there. We'd obviously like to open the discussion up to sort of questions and points from the floor now. Just bear in mind, obviously we've got microphones, but you haven't. So when we come to you, if you can speak as loudly as you can, you won't be deafening anybody. And also, if you can frame your questions and your points as concisely as possible, just so that we can go around the room and get as many people as possible in the team. Okay, down here in the red jersey.
I have a question around, have you worked with any other Muslim and Jewish organisations, and what kind of resistances have you faced, if any? And how have you overcome those?
Okay, so just in case not everybody caught that, it's a question around whether the speakers have worked with any Muslim and Jewish organisations, and sort of the second part.
And how they overcame. I mean, not individually, but as a MUJU.
Do you want to say that, or?
Well, I think you have more of a history of working with like Alif Aleph and different organisations.
I guess we've always, it's interesting actually, because when we first started, I personally was quite concerned sometimes about how my own community would react to certain things, and I think actually often that was my own prejudice, because you have this idea that our community is so conservative or whatever, and you think, how will people react? And actually, on the whole, the community, the reaction has always been really positive, and people are actually crying out for this kind of discussion. And we've done events at various Muslim gatherings, like Muslim community organisations, and generally overwhelmingly it's been really positive. We actually even had a group that came down to come and sit out from Regent's Park Mosque.
Together with Finchley Synagogue. They came together.
Which again, like a few years ago, I would have thought that was quite a tricky one, because again, Regent's Park Mosque, I would have associated them being it's quite a conservative congregation. But actually, they've now appointed like a really cool interfaith officer who we know really well. She brought a group down. So actually, on the whole, it has been positive. I mean, I can remember one example of when an organisation invited us, but wanted to edit certain sketches, to which we refused, because we thought you have to have the whole body of work, and it was fine. They accepted. So, but generally speaking, it's always been really positive. And the thing is, I guess from our side, that we try and create work that is accessible. So I think for us, it's really important to not just produce some kind of really, higher level artistic stuff that our community won't appreciate. I mean, for us, it's about going on this journey, but then taking our communities with us. And so in order to do that, it's about making the show entertaining and edgy, but at the same time keeping it accessible. So like there's no swearing in our show, there's no over like sexualization in our show, there's no like too much touching, and it's definitely very much, I don't want to say family friendly because that sounds really lame, but it's very much adult issues that we're talking about. So I guess it's not kind of a show for kids, but at the same time we're trying to make it accessible, so that wherever you see MUJU, whether it's on theatre or in a community centre, it's the same brand, it's the same MUJU. So on the whole, it's been really positive.
Just from me and the chair, I mean, there's a supplementary question that sort of leads on quite nicely from that one. And obviously, 12 months ago, there was a particularly bitter conflict going on in the Middle East at the time, in Gaza. And I was just wondering, could this play and could all the preparation and rehearsals and co-directing and everything have taken place under that banner and under that atmosphere?
Should I answer that?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of hard to go back in hindsight. I think it depends on who you're working with in the room, to be honest with you. Because I mean, I guess MUJU is an open platform to a variety of views. But if you're working with a particular cast that maybe shares a diversity of opinions, it's easier because there's a balance in the room. I also think it depends on the professionality of the actors as well. I think if you would be creating, this piece of work in particular was a professional piece of work, so we were working with professional actors, so I guess the advantage that you have with professional actors is, whereas they are from the Muslim and the Jewish communities, and whereas they do bring their history and their stories in, at the same time they are professional actors, so they can make that switch. I mean, even in this process, for example, Ramsey, he is Palestinian, he does have a Palestinian background, and he actually struggled with some of the sketches around like the checkpoint and different sketches, but because he's an actor he could switch it off. However, I think if you do something like this in a community context, it would be a lot more difficult because people come in with very different reasons because they usually want to bring their stories in. I also think that any of the content you create has a heightened political meaning. It's like you almost can't say one thing without saying the other. Even when we wanted to write a statement about like how bad we felt about what was going on last year, even that statement was difficult to write because you're like, how can you balance it in a way that it's like valid and not tokenistic, but doesn't kind of like basically everything you say and do is political. So yeah, long story short, I think in that context it would be more difficult. But I don't think it's not possible, and I think in fact it's more important and it's braver to do something in a time of that. And that's also when we put on the Peace Lab, which was kind of a theatre laboratory in which people came together to actually question the concept of peace and what that means.
And also, I guess when we were looking for people to participate in this project, and as Andrea said, it was a professional piece. We auditioned, lots and lots of actors, and one of the things that we were looking for, as well as obviously kind of good performers, but also people that were able to be self-critical and were able to reflect. And one of the questions that we asked everyone was, questions around their own cultural identity, and specifically what aspects of their identity or things associated with their identity are they uncomfortable with. And we were really trying to see which actors were able to make those questions and to be self-critical, because I think in this MUJU process that you have to have that.
Yeah.
It's really important.
But at the same time, for it to be good, also in the people you select, you need to have people from a variety of backgrounds, or it wouldn't, it would lose the kind of heart of the sort of encounter if everybody thinks the same anyway. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And obviously, more questions, more points on the floor. It doesn't just have to be around the play, of course. I know some of you will have been to see come and sit down, but also we've got quite a good opportunity this evening with some people of both a Muslim and Jewish background here on the panel. If you want to ask questions about sort of interfaith relations generally, then that's a good time to do so.
Not everybody at the same time.
Yeah, right from the back there.
You talked a bit about the reaction and of
people from the Muslim and Jewish community. What's the reaction you got from other communities, and have other people suggested that they want to get involved as well or do something similar? It's a good question. We really tried for this show in particular to try and reach out beyond our communities. So hopefully anyone who came to see it would get it, and there was no kind of in-joke. So I mean, there was kind of maybe the odd word here and there, but as in it generally, you know, and unfortunately, particularly for Muslims, I guess our dirty laundry is like being aired everywhere. So I guess people are very aware of kind of Muslim politics and kind of Muslim cultural issues, etc. But certainly we tried to make it a show that appealed to kind of Muslims, Jews, but also neither of the above. And we actually did do quite a lot of market research. And there was a good turnout of kind of non-Muslim and Jews that came to see it.
About a third, I think.
About a third of people. And one of the questions we actually asked was around that, wasn't it? What was the question?
It was basically a question, do you think this show is accessible to a diverse audience? And I think most people agreed it was. I guess another thing is good art is accessible to everyone. So when you really tap into human issues, no matter which faith background or cultural background these issues are kind of dressed in, when the kind of human character shines through and the conflict and the dilemma and the crisis shines through, everybody recognizes that, and that's a very powerful way to bring people in as well.
Anything else that anybody wants to ask? One of the point for me in the chat, this may stimulate some discussion, some ideas from the floor. And Salman, you mentioned that quite often in London and just generally in the UK, although Muslim and Jewish and other faith and other ethnic communities live side by side, you touched on the fact that we don't always necessarily live together. We may be literal neighbours, but we don't necessarily sort of integrate that well, and we maybe sort of self-isolate. Is that something that you think is particularly better or worse in London than maybe elsewhere in the UK? And also to Andrea, I mean, you touched on your experience coming from the Netherlands to London in particular. Is that something that you sort of feel and sense having moved here?
I honestly think London is a beacon of hope. It really is. I don't think there's a city that celebrates diversity as much as London does. In Europe the whole rhetoric is tolerance, but I think tolerance is kind of a word that implies, sure, I'll tolerate you as long as you stay on your side of the fence and we can just pretend to each get on with our lives and not know each other. But I think London celebrates, and I guess the whole kind of Muslim-Jewish initiatives in London there's quite a lot going on. For example, when the Brabantese Somalian centre got burned down in Muswell Hill, one of the synagogues, I think maybe Finchley Synagogue, has opened up its doors to host the iftars for that community during Ramadan. And there's just a lot of, not just MUJU, there's a lot of Muslim-Jewish networks and initiatives and exchanges going on, which are maybe a little bit more like social action and dialogue based, but still, or organizations like 3FF, which kind of bring the whole world together because everybody loves what they do, because they work in the arts and politics and education and all of that. What was the question again? I think London is basically an example, personally.
Just a sort of quick show of hands from the floor. I mean, would people here tonight sort of say that they feel that Muslim and Jewish communities here in London sort of live side by side but not really talking to each other, or on the other hand that people sort of maybe feel they're integrated? And hands up if you're Muslim, have you got Jewish friends, and if you're Jewish, have you got Muslim friends? Yeah, it's maybe about half and half, but it sort of indicates that there's maybe still some way to go. Okay, there was a hand up there for another question, I think.
We talked about positive things, but do you have any difficult situations, or how you had difficulties, or how we dealt with it? So you say it's all positive. but we haven't had any difficulty or something.
Okay, so just in case not everybody heard that, I think the question is around, obviously we've heard a lot of positive things about the Better MUJU project and sort of from the speakers this evening, and Andrea sort of touched on London. But the question is around sort of, did you run into difficulties sort of as part of the project?
Difficult bits are always the best, aren't they?
I mean, there's obviously lots of difficulty around talking about Israel-Palestine. That's obviously a big sticking point. And I think, like, ultimately, I guess it's really important for MUJU anyway that whatever we produce, it is a shared voice, and it's a negotiation. So kind of in every sketch that we're doing, we're always asking ourselves, like what are we saying with this sketch? And is it something that we're comfortable saying? And yeah, I mean it is a challenge. I'm not gonna lie. It's very, particularly at times when things are kind of very heightened in the region and passions are much higher. It is tricky, and I guess ultimately I think what we're trying to do is to try and find, try and be brave enough to be self-critical. And that only works, I guess, if both sides allow themselves to be vulnerable. And I guess that doesn't just apply to the Middle East. I guess that applies across the board. But yeah, and then I guess it depends on the people in the room and having the right people in the room that are able to explore these things genuinely. But it is a challenge, and I guess it's a constant negotiation. But yeah.
And PR-wise, it's a challenge. Like keeping your public, I guess, your sort of public identity as an organisation, keeping that genuine and balanced is a real challenge, because when world events kick off, sometimes people come to MUJU and it's like, well, MUJU, what do you think? And then how do you position yourself? Because basically every word you utter is political in some way, and because you're constantly walking that fine line, especially when stuff is happening in the world. I don't know. I've had times where I've had to write a difficult email to someone and just thought I can't write a single word without this having some kind of political implication, which I don't mean or don't want to be associated with. So it's, I guess, communicating MUJU is a lot more difficult than it seems, because I guess MUJU can run the risk of being like, oh yeah, look at everything that's going on in the world and you guys are just a bunch of people making theatre, laughing together, why is that important? So to kind of keep MUJU genuine and to say actually this is a space in which voices can be heard and aired and relationships can develop, and obviously it's not going to fix the world, but it is a space where people take ownership of what they know about each other. I guess communicating that and the sort of authenticity of that and protecting the authenticity of that is very challenging with MUJU.
Also, I guess people tend to learn, I think, a lot about the other through that process, and I think, and then that comes back down to communities engaged, because I think I guess we're all biased, I guess, in our own ways, and we all tend to listen to people that think the same way that we do, and I guess the MUJU process, it kind of forces people to listen to different perspectives, and also one of the things that I guess through my own journey I've realised that many of my kind of Jewish friends that I've made have very similar worldviews to that I have, and again I guess the kind of the stereotype, and maybe before I was involved in MUJU, I guess my own stereotype was obviously I'm sure all the Jews will support what Israel's doing or whatever, and actually when I having engaged with more and more, I've suddenly realised, actually there's this diversity of opinion, but I just didn't kind of make the effort to reach out and find that out for myself.
And sometimes it's the other way around as well. Like, I guess one of the important things last summer, I don't know if you might be sharing this, but one thing you seemed quite gutted about is that the sort of Facebook feed around what was going on, of course, and it was awful what happened to Gaza. And the sort of Facebook feed, I guess, about ex-MUJU members that, you felt actually we'd done a lot of work together, and then you see what they post and their opinions. And I guess that's quite painful when you think you've been on a journey together and then you see maybe, opinions supporting what happened or defending it somehow. And I guess in that sense, sometimes it can be difficult when you really put a lot of love and energy and investment in something and you think, yes, hopefully this has made a difference. And then sometimes it doesn't, you know, with some people it does and with some people it doesn't. And the only thing you can do is create the work and plant the seeds where they take root, and that's what you need to be thankful for, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's a lady down here with blue scarf.
Yes, hi. I think what you do is great, and I work with a TV production company, and I just think it's a shame that it's just staying in theatre and not being transferred maybe to the big screen. And have you had producers approach you, maybe, you know, take your ideas and sketches, put it into series or, you know, films or, you know?
Essentially the question is, have you had a call from a Hollywood producer?
Well, yeah, my phone hasn't stopped ringing.
BBC usually does, you know, so especially BBC Three has had recently programs and you know, who have similar ideas about, you know, comedy and...
We have had a few. Like we actually worked on a radio pilot for Radio 4, sketch show pilot, where we did a lot of this, and that's still kind of in conversation. And then we did it. We actually did have a long time ago. We had something in with Channel 4. But at the moment, no, we're just doing theatre. But you know, we should talk.
Can I add a but? But we have some excellent sketches and songs which we're actually considering turning into music videos. So if you know nice music video producers, that would be interesting in collaborating.
I think that, you know, the world has changed as well now. I mean, there are so many
It's all
ways in
digital.
which you can get your work out. You don't have to necessarily rely on you know, the gatekeepers like, you know, BBC or whatever. You know, a good YouTube clip can, you know, reach millions.
Okay, great. And I think there was another hand up at the back earlier. Yeah.
Sorry, I may have missed this earlier on, but in your show you referred to the boycott of the tricycle. Can you talk about how that may have impacted how you put the show together this year?
Do you want me to answer that?
I can say that.
What do you mean by impacted how you put the show together?
I mean, did you, of course you were conscious of that, and did you have to maybe, of course you put a bit in there about, and you referred to it in one of the sketches, but did you have to change anything, or did you think there'd be more criticism possibly?
I was going to say, I think you might just have to sort of fill people in on what the boycott of the tricycle was about. So I was going to say, I'm somewhat ignorant of it myself.
Yeah, I think there's more people that don't know about it than that do know about it, probably. But the boycott kind of had to do with, I guess for the past 7 years, the UK Jewish Film Festival was hosted by the Tricycle. And in the light of what was going on in Gaza last year, the Tricycle board they wanted to host the festival, but they didn't want to accept Israeli government funding, or they didn't want to take any funding from anybody in any part of that conflict. They wanted to kind of step away from it symbolically, and that created a big backlash from the Jewish community on the Tricycle, and that's something that they struggle a lot with. And I guess as MUJU, you know, being in the Tricycle for 10 years, you know, the company has a close relationship with the organization, and it's obviously something we couldn't ignore. And the Tricycle has been incredibly supportive throughout the production by helping us artistically, but giving us total artistic freedom to kind of create whatever we felt we needed to create. So it's been an excellent process working with them, and they've been very supportive and kind of letting us do whatever we wanted to do. And that's not to say that they weren't nervous about that sketch, because obviously it did touch upon last summer, but they still wanted, you know, to let us keep that artistic integrity and say what we felt we needed to say. And I guess we felt we couldn't ignore it, but we wanted to kind of play again on the kind of hysterical assumptions and perceptions that existed around the issue, and turn that into a sketch.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were under more scrutiny this year though, compared to maybe previous?
No, absolutely not. That's the amazing thing. I mean, in the beginning, we were thinking, ooh, you know, what's going to happen when they see this sketch, you know? But we weren't, and that's something that I guess we were incredibly pleased by as well, and we thought, wow, you know, this is amazing because you know, when you really understand the arts, you understand you can't censor it, and that's something the Tricycle really understands and respects, and they didn't scrutinize us in any way, which was amazing, which is a testimony to their artistic integrity, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, Indu Ruby-Singh, the artistic director, she actually came and watched the show on the press night, which is, you know, obviously, which is kind of, you know, really incredible, and, you know, I guess for the first time, you know, to allow herself, to allow us to really have total creative freedom, and actually for the theatre to allow, I guess, themselves to be set up in some way on their own stage, I guess, was also quite brave, and I think shows the strength of character of those people involved.
Okay, and just before we go to any further questions, because there are some new people here this evening, just a little bit of information about City Circle. City Circle's been running for the last 16 years, and in addition to our regular Friday night talks, we also run 2 Saturday schools, which may possibly be like a little bit like what Andrea referred to, having been involved herself. They're based in both West London and Harrow, and they provide additional support for school children in the area who may need additional support with their learning. We also run a homeless project on Sunday evenings, based in Lincoln's Inn Fields in Holborn, where we provide 150 hot meals and hot and cold drinks and snacks to homeless people living in that area. Both of these projects are entirely dependent on volunteers and donations. We don't receive as an organisation any government or public sector funding. And so if you want to find out more about either of these, either if you're interested in getting involved in being a volunteer teacher, or you'd like to get involved with the homeless project on a voluntary basis, or if you'd possibly like to consider setting up a standing order to help us with our work. There are forms at the back where you can sign up if you're interested in finding out more about becoming a volunteer. And there are also standing order forms if you'd be able to consider supporting us financially. Okay, do we have any further questions or discussion points from the floor now? Yeah, lady over here.
Yeah. Hi. So it seems that much of your work covers topics that are quite controversial in both communities, which is admirable. My question is, how do you strike the right balance between being thought-provoking or just being purely scandalous?
It's a really good question, and it's something that we're always asking ourselves. So, I mean, generally speaking, we think you can mock people, individuals, communities of a particular faith background, but we try not to mock the actual religion. So that's something we try and observe. Obviously, there are nothing's ever black and white. There's always kind of grey areas, and then I guess it just comes down to judgment and also intention. So we're always asking ourselves, like, what are we trying to say with this sketch? Like, what are we trying to question? Like, what do we want people to think? And if that comes from something genuine, then kind of it's kind of okay to go there. But it's definitely never about kind of shocking for the sake of shocking or being kind of offensive for the sake of being offensive. That's just like, we're just not interested in that. It's definitely about trying to get us thinking about things, but also, as I said at the start, really taking the community with us on this journey. And so, yeah, that's like a constant battle, and we're always reflecting on that. And yeah, it's definitely not. I'm not interested in shocking for the sake of it.
And it's hit and miss, to be really honest. Yeah. It's hit and miss. As with any art that you put out there, it's hit and miss. Sometimes something translates exactly and hits the point, and sometimes it just misses the point. And that's fine. I mean, then I guess the idea is you have to revisit it and readdress it and kind of continue to develop it. But I think a good example of a sketch that kind of really strikes that balance really well between kind of outrageous and like kind of heart-stabbing, but at the same time really clever, is the sketch. We had this one sketch in the show called Lawrence the Star, which was basically about, it kind of touched upon the idea that Of course, with all these ISIS videos of beheadings going viral and everything, the media is so focused on kind of white European victims that all the thousands of Muslims that are the first victims of ISIS are never even in the media. So this whole sketch was about, a Muslim journalist and an English journalist being captured, and the Muslim journalist being trucked out to the middle of the desert and shot with a machine gun without a face and a name. And Salman, who really brilliantly played the sort of jihadi, said, "Oh, Lawrence, so lovely to see you. Big day for you. You'll be getting your very own dress rehearsal, so I'll be fitting you with your orange jumpsuit, and then Salim will be beheading you. He's come all the way from Saudi Arabia just for you." And then basically, it's kind of like, ooh, and then, the Muslim guy said, "Oh, hang on, why do I get trucked out to the middle of the desert and shot with a machine gun and you get your very own dress rehearsal?" And people kind of can't help but laugh, but it's really not funny. But the kind of, the humor, the setup sort of makes you think about it, and then he goes, "Oh, I can't help that I'm white and European." And it's just kind of that ooh moment, which I think that was an example in which we strike that balance really well, because it's of course scandalous to laugh about beheadings, but really it's not about that. It's about the message that, hang on, we're all focused on this, but that completely detracts attention away from all of these victims. So again, it's kind of intention and underlying message, which saves that a bit.
Okay, that's great, thank you very much. I'm afraid our time is now up, and we've probably got the room for about another 10 minutes or so. So, if people have got other questions or they want to come and speak to Salman and Andrea, then just come up, and I'm sure we'll give you the opportunity to do that. And next week we're going to be talking about educating Pakistan, and next Friday's talk is being held on the 68th anniversary of Pakistan's independence. And as the nation continues to battle a range of internal and external difficulties, some people argue that these lie in its failed education system. We've got speakers lined up from Care Pakistan, the Citizens Foundation, and SOAS. So if you're around next Friday evening, then please do come and join us. It's the same time, the same place, 6:45 here at Arbor House. But for now, thank you very much once again to Salman and Andrea. And until next week, Shalom Shabbat, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.